Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order, please. I'd like to call the September 9th, 2019 regular meeting of Council to order at 7 p.m. and acknowledge that we are on the the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, which include the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. Looking for an approval of the agenda. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Logan. Any additions, errors, anything like that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Public participation. I'd like to invite the public to take this opportunity to address council with concerns or questions they may have. There is a maximum of 20 minutes allocated, Peter. So, so you got a full 20 minutes to talk tonight. Comments pertaining to a matter that has been the subject of a public hearing are prohibited where the bylaws related to the matters have not been presented to council for consideration or adoption. Remember that the public when you come forward, please state your name and address. Is there any public who would like to discuss tonight? No? All right, thank you. Moving on to Mayor's message. First of all, the Victoria Shamrocks. I had the privilege of doing the ceremonial ball drop at Game 1 of the Mann Cup Championships at the Q Centre on Friday and attended a luncheon with the Victoria Shamrocks and the Peterborough Lakers organizations along with Mayor Stu Young and Chief Russ Chips the day before. We should be very proud as Colwood and Colwood residents that we are hosting the Shamrocks here in our jurisdiction and the fact that we have the Mann Cup happening here in Colwood. Once again, that has put Colwood on the national stage. In addition to that, we also have the Astor Trophy at Royal Colwood Golf Club. It was my distinct honor to welcome some of the top female golfers from around the world to our city last week at the prestigious Royal Colwood Golf Club. While New Zealand took the trophy, Canada was extremely well represented. And just for those who weren't aware, the Astor Trophy until 1996, until 2007, was known as the Commonwealth Trophy, and it's only played once every 4 years. So it was quite exciting to see some of, and truth matter is I was looking up a little bit, and there has been some major female golfers who have come out of that tournament to end up playing in the WPGA. So that's awesome as well. Royal Beach. At Committee of the Whole last week, staff briefed council on the Royal Beach application for zoning and OCP amendments. This seaside village will transform our community, and it will impact our population, road layouts, traffic patterns, waterfront paths, parks, and much more. More information will be presented to council over the coming months before decisions are made. Please check colwoods.ca to keep up with the processes and as that project moves along. And finally, the last thing was beach events have wrapped up for the season. I had a great time welcoming people on several occasions, and I think many of you, if not all of you, did that as well. So I very much appreciate council for taking that time to actually welcome people to those attendants. I was at the last event on Saturday night. I just ballparking it, but I would guess that there was probably close to 500 people in attendance. It was very, very busy. The food trucks were hopping, and I actually had many people come up to me afterwards to give me recommendations. For example, people were asking if we could put pallets in front of the stage so that people could actually dance. They were having a hard time dancing on the sand. And so there's just a lot of public engagement, which is a really wonderful thing, and it's great to see community come together, and it's something that I'm really proud of, the fact that this council has sort of seen that vision and supported that. So I think that's great. They're a great way to showcase Colwood's amazing waterfront and signal to potential investors that our community is eager for them to bring out their businesses and demonstrate the things that are happening there. And that is it for me. Does anyone else have anything they would like to share on their mayor's message? No? Nobody? Okay. Then I'm going to move along. 5.1, regular council meeting minutes of August 26. May I get a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Any errors, omissions, questions? I'm thinking people's first names right now, and so I'm getting stuck on last names. Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Public hearing minutes of August 26th. I need a motion to adopt the minutes. Moved by Councillor Jensen, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any errors, omissions, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 5.3, report of the public hearing. I need a motion to receive the report.
Move receipt.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any errors, omissions, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And 5.4, committee of the whole meeting minutes of August 16th. I need a mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. You get to second everything today, Stuart. Seeing any errors, omissions, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 6.1 presentations. We are fortunate to have Bruce Williams here this evening from the South Island Prosperity Project, and he's going to give us an update on the impact and progress of SIP.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for your ongoing support and understanding of what we do at South Island Prosperity Partnership. It's been a great year. I won't take a lot of your time. I was at a committee of another municipality a couple of months ago, and it was the night of the NBA Finals when the Raptors were winning the game. And all the tablets had little boxes down in the corner, and everybody was watching the game. And I know the Shamrocks are playing tonight, so if anybody needs an update or wants to give one on the score, we'd be happy to hear that tonight. So, but thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I would like to also acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. We are continuing into our 4th year of operation. We're halfway through year 4. I'm going to go through some really simple stuff for you tonight. Actually, the smart guy in the organization is Dallas, who was supposed to be here to do some of this, but he had some family things to deal with tonight, so I will do my best. I'm going to give you a quick 3-year status update, and we're going to talk about Colwood's particular role in guiding the future of what South Island Prosperity is going to be and what it's going to be all about. We have grown substantially. We are up to 54 members right now. We currently also have 7 of our First Nations. We have a couple that are pending membership. That'll take us up to 9. And we have another pending municipal member joining us very soon, too. We are made up of 9 volunteer directors on our board. We have 5 employees, 2 part-time contractors. That would be me and 1 other guy. So if you take a look at the finances of what we do, every dollar of municipal investment that you and the other municipalities participate in leverages another dollar of non-municipal contribution. So over that period of time that we've been around, it's about $1.48 million. And that's a gold standard achievement relative to cities across Canada. So everybody should be very proud of that model and that leadership and how it's in place in this municipality. So one of our mandates, one of the 3 major things we do is go get dough and bring it back. Get it from the province and the feds, bring it back and invest it in solutions for this region. We've had $700,000 in federal monies brought forward so far that we have flowed through and invested into projects. We have attracted 3 high-paying employers to this region. So mandate number 1 for this organization is to create household-sustaining jobs, which we have done. We have some that are pending that I can't tell you right now, but we will have an announcement about some others coming forward too and what that's going to look like. So we're all very, very, very excited about that. First dollar industries is what we're trying to find here. So the best way to define that, of course, is with a picture. The green spike is the first dollar job. When we create that job and bring it here, it flows out into those other areas. Expenses, taxes, and payroll. Next layer out, it creates more local jobs. Income for government, financial firms, utilities, transportation. Then everybody goes shopping and they buy a car and they buy a house and they go to Parks and Rec. And then further out it goes into charitable nations, service jobs, retail jobs, and all the rest of that. That's sort of the way that things radiate out from these jobs that we create. So we're very pleased with the way that this has been moving forward and the success and the traction that we've had so far. The companies that have gone through something called the Trade Accelerator Program, or TAP, that's done through the Provincial Chambers of Commerce. The World Trade Center in Vancouver administer it. They hand it out to the Chambers of Commerce across the province. The Chamber in Greater Victoria are the ones that administer it here. They asked SIP to undertake this, so we have gone through with that program as well. 30 companies have gone through it so far with an average of 23% increases in exports within their first year of participating. And when we've kind of done a little bit of spitballing on that, we figure that the organizations that have come through will probably be creating something between 70 and 100 jobs in the next year as their organizations grow and as they continue to find traction. There are 6 Indigenous-led enterprises now located in the Songhees Wellness Center, an organization that we helped create. So number 2 in our priorities is to accelerate and facilitate self-directed economic development for First Nations. We've had great traction with that, and we're very proud of that, and proud to work alongside those Indigenous-based businesses and the nations who are members with us. And we've also been given some awards. We applied for some of them. The others just kind of showed up. You don't do what you do to get awards, but when you do win them, it shows that you're doing something right. So we're very proud of that, too. It's about as far as we get into the bragging part. So where do we go from here, along with you and the other municipal partners and the private partners and the nonprofits and our indigenous partners? As I mentioned, we're halfway through year 4 of a 5-year member-approved strategic plan, which you have been compliant with and supportive of. We appreciate that. So here's what we're going to do going forward. We're going to do an organizational review of the organization. It will start in December. It will be a committee of SIP members. We have a consultant on board to do that. We're going to take a look at all of the important stuff, the mandate, the structure. Are we on track? Are we doing what we need to do? What else do we need to do? What do you want us to do? We need your feedback. We want to know what we can do to help Colwood be what you want to be. That's the reason for this agency to be here, is to partner with all of our participating partners to enable you to achieve your full potential. So the strategic planning process, and here's a heads up for this one, once that gets underway in 2020 and we move on into year 5, after that we will be coming back to all of our current municipal partners, our First Nation partners, to say at the end of year 5, how about another 5 years? The progress that we're going to be experiencing at that point is kind of a pivotal point for us. We, of course, would like to see that momentum move forward. Excuse me, and the successes we've had are built on this 5-year plan that we had. But after the 5 years, we don't want to squander all that work that's gone into that. So I'm not here to talk about that tonight, but I'm just here to tell you that in 2020, when we come back in budget deliberations, that's when we're going to say, how are we doing? Are we going to move forward for another 5 years? We hope we are. We're going to leave that decision up to all of you. As you know, the way that we did this the last time was that we aligned it with the timing of the municipal elections. You may or may not be in a position to want to commit funding responsibilities for the administration and what that profile will be following you, or you may want to do that. But again, that's all a part of this organizational review that we're going to be doing, and we again seek your input into that. Councillor Kobayashi is the representative to SIP right now. We may be asking him to help us with this, but if any of you want to be a part of that process in the org review, please tell Councillor Kobayashi, and we'd be pleased to welcome you into that entire process. That's it. That's all I got. If you have questions, I may have answers, or I may have to call Dallas. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you may have.
Thank you. You look like a rodeo calf guy with the hands up there.
Country.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple quick questions there. Can we get a copy of that to be attached to the agenda, please? Yeah, number one.
I can leave the stick, actually.
The $700,000 of federal money, Bruce, I'm just trying to understand, how that has flown through to the communities. If you can explain that, that's my first question.
Do you want that now, or do you want to?
I'll just ask my two questions,
sure.
And then you can answer them. And my second one is the 3 high-paying employers that came to Greater Victoria.
Yeah.
Where did they end up going?
That's an excellent question. One of them I know is in Victoria. The others, this is not the right answer, but I don't know. I believe one of them is in Saanich. The other might be in Victoria, too. And I say that because they are technology companies. But quite honestly, Doug, I don't know where they went. And I'm sorry, that's a question that Dallas would be able to answer, but I'll get you that answer. The funding itself came largely from Western Economic Diversification, which was money that was put in place for a number of projects over a period of years. And it also includes the $250,000 we got as a finalist in the Smart Cities competition for Infrastructure Canada. So that was flow-through money to form the submission that we put in to that project, to that submission. So thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none? Bruce, thank you for taking the time to come out.
Appreciate your support and for all you did as the representative.
And thank you for the work that SIP does.
Thanks very much. And I can just leave this stick here if that's easier, or do you want me to email it to you? What do you have it? Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Moving on then. 7, correspondence. Council, we've received letters from the District of Saanich, the District of Highlands, the District of Central Saanich, the Corporation of the Town of Esquimalt, and the Town of Sydney, passing resolutions supporting in principle the location of a passenger ferry terminal at the Royal Bay Waterfront. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Jensen and Logan. I don't know what is going on with my brain. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Your Worship?
Yes.
I'd just like to move that we communicate our thanks to these municipalities for their support.
Okay, thank you. I will make sure that. Do you want to make that a formal motion, or I can
Not
just
if
do
it's
it?
not needed.
I'll make
no.
sure that it gets done.
Your Worship, just a quick question here. Have you heard anything from Victoria? Are they going to be supportive of this or not?
Yes. No, not from Victoria. Victoria, I spoke with Mayor Helps at CRD last week. It is within their engineering department, and they are just trying to look at the configuration of how they move passengers either through public transportation. Right now, the engineer was thinking that they were going to have to be worried about moving cars down there to move people in and out. And they're just looking at how do they move people in and out of the terminal on the Victoria side. And I expect that I should be receiving something quite shortly from them. But it has not been presented to their council yet to vote on.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to 8, correspondence requiring council direction. 8.1, the Mayor of Squamish and the Mayor of Tofino have written a letter regarding the joint local government submission regarding Provincial Plastic Action Plan. The District of Squamish and Tofino are seeking support for a joint local government submission regarding Provincial Plastic Action Plans. They did send a recommendation that council, and I'll just read it, and we can discuss after that. The recommendation was that council support and join the submission from the districts of Squamish and Tofino in response to the Minister of Education and Climate Action Strategy's proposed amendments to the recycling regulations of the Environmental Management Act. What's the will of council? Councillor Day?
Thank you. I'd like to move the recommendation, and if that's seconded, I'll give you some reasons why.
Okay. Thank you. So moved by Councillor Day, second by Councillor Baxter. Councillor Day?
Thank you. So quite a few years ago now, when the recycling regulations were changing and there was considerable input at that time, I participated at the CRD to try to understand the solid waste management plan and the impacts for recycling on it. And I've read quite carefully through their letter, and I think it makes great sense because they're trying to address some of the difficulties that result from having a very forward-looking recycling plan, which sounds like a great idea, but we are increasingly finding that there is a real proliferation of single-use items that are just being put in the recycling, and people aren't really giving that reduce and reuse much of a chance in societies. So it really does require some greater action to really try to create a system that not only works for consumers, but also works for municipal governments who are, in effect, footing the bill quite often for the costs of very desirable recycling programs, but that are perhaps dealing with much more than they need to deal with.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? Seeing none, I'll just give you what, so we had a similar motion, although it wasn't exactly like this at CRD, regarding styrofoam. And I voted against that at CRD. And the reason I voted against that at CRD was because I don't believe it is within the CRD's jurisdiction, and by the same token, I do not believe it's within the municipal's jurisdiction to actually be mandating those things. Those are provincial and federal regulations. I will be supporting this motion, though, because it is directing the province to say, hey, you guys should look at this. So I feel very comfortable in supporting this motion this evening. Is there any other before I call the question? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 9.1, new business. Director of Long Range Planning and Sustainability, Housing Needs Assessment Partnership, and Affordable Housing Update. I will invite our Director of Long Range Planning and Sustainability to present to Council.
Thank you, Your Worship. So tonight, staff are presenting on a report before you with an opportunity for council to consider a partnership with the CRD on preparing a housing needs assessment. We're also going to take a brief moment to overview some key factors and data associated with housing affordability in Colwood. So, why are we here talking about housing needs assessments? In April of this year, the BC government adopted legislation mandating that all local governments conduct housing needs assessments and that we keep them updated at least every 5 years. Colwood last prepared a housing needs assessment report in 2008, so in our case, an update is warranted. It's also hoped that this housing needs assessment provides information that would be foundational to future work with respect to housing strategy and to determine whether, how much non-market affordable housing is needed to meet OCP objectives. As outlined in the report before you, the Capital Regional District Housing has offered to partner with member municipalities to conduct housing needs assessments. Staff feels that the benefits of doing so include reduced costs, which are primarily in-kind staff support, and also the opportunity to collaborate with other municipalities and CRD staff that work with housing every day. If council wishes to take up the CRD's offer, staff recommend that a resolution be made in support to forward a joint grant application to BCM as a first step. So the CRD would be handling that grant application. The grant is available to both individual local governments and regional districts to cover what is expected to be most, if not all, of the costs associated with a housing needs assessment. Next, I will briefly summarize some of the key trends and data for affordable housing in Colwood. So first off, I should define for a moment affordable housing. So our attainable housing policy actually defines affordable housing as, let me take a deep breath here, a characteristic assigned to homes for which rent or carrying charges, including utilities paid by tenants, or mortgage payments, taxes, condominium fees, and insurance paid for by owner-occupants do not exceed 30% of a household's income. That tracks very closely with the definition that CMHC and the federal government uses. They also use a 30% number of gross household income. So using Stats Canada and CMHC's core housing needs indicators, we can see that the level of what they call unaffordability, so that's the reverse of the definition I just stated, has been lowering slightly in Colwood between 2011 and 2016. So right now we're at about 20.8%. For context, Colwood's unaffordable housing rate, as estimated by Stats Canada, is lower than some regional municipalities, including the City of Langford at 26.1% and the City of Victoria at 36.6%. Once again, this is 2016 data. The Core Housing Needs Report, this is CMHC and Stats Canada's Core Housing Needs Report, also suggested that renters in Colwood face significantly higher rates of unaffordability than owners. So renters, as you can see, are significantly more close to 30% relative to just over 15 for owners. Next, this is something we focused on in the report because it's data we have, are the numbers of BC housing supported dwellings in Colwood, and we tried to relate it once again to Langford and Victoria for comparables. So right now there's about 320 dwelling units in Colwood that are supported by BC Housing, which represents about 4.3% of our total housing stock. By the next couple of years, it is expected that up to 343 new BC housing supported units will be built in Colwood, which is over 100% increase. So here's some recent photos. So 284 Belmont Road, this is a BC housing supported affordable housing complex with 48 units. 330 Whale Road. So it's 124 new units. Both of those projects are under construction currently. And this is inside the Helios project, which is actually calculated within the report as a current housing. It got occupancy in December, so it was counted within the statistics as current existing housing. So as council is aware, the city has provided significant financial support to affordable housing developments, including just over $1 million in direct financial support through grants from the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, as well as over $800,000 in waivers of any contributions and covenant requirements. Also, the Grants and Aid program on an annual basis provides funding. I think the most significant was $50,000 for Cockrell House several years ago. So lastly, I'll just note that the growth in non-market housing is actually outpaced by the growth that is expected over the next couple of years with respect to market rental. So in the Ani project alone, there's 471 purpose-built rental units being proposed for phase 1. And with that, I end my conclusion. Thank you very much.
I will go to council. Council, do you have any questions for staff? I have Councillor Baxter, then Councillor Kobayashi, then Councillor Day, then Councillor... Oh my goodness, I have all of you. So we're going to go this side, and then... so Councillor Baxter first.
In the legislation that requires this work, they said it wouldn't actually be required until they publish the standards in the regulations. So that's been done, presumably.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thanks. The definition of affordable housing in the report doesn't mention median income or any particular income. It says mortgage payments, taxes, condominium fees, and insurance paid for by owner-occupants do not exceed 30% of the household income. But then in your clarification of that in the next paragraph, you mentioned the median income. And on the presentation, it looked as if we were defining anything that costs less than $2,141 per month as affordable. But obviously, that's not affordable for everybody.
Yes. The clarifying point in the report was the median income. So that number is an indicator if as applied to a house with a median income. So I don't know how many households in Colwood actually have the median income, probably not many, but it was just meant to give a figure to that statistic.
And it would seem that there are some people who can't afford any accommodation. They're living in their cars or living rough. So will this process gather numbers on all of those levels of affordability and all of those levels of income and how we match up?
Yes, there are figures within the core housing needs indicators that I mentioned that try to get at how many households in Colwood are underserved by their housing, so that that would be housing that's in ill repair or would not have sufficient bedrooms that be expected for the family that's living there. And those figures right now go to 2016. But it's hoped that through the housing needs assessment, we could use those figures and extrapolate to the current time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi? I had it written down that way.
Okay.
You're next.
Yeah, I do have some comments and questions. First of all, with the 107% increase in the number of affordable units in Colwood, that puts us up around 9%. So what is the OCP doesn't specify what our target is, right? It doesn't. And what is the ideal number? Like, what should it be? That will make us one of the better ones, and from what I understand, talking with the CRD, one of the better ones of the 13 municipalities. That's my first question. Second one is, I guess the issue that I have with affordable housing, I'm all for it, but we're tending to put them into our core area. And I consider that, I'm not a capitalist or anything like it, yes I am, but they're high revenue areas. And you just can't keep putting affordable housing in your high revenue areas. It doesn't make sense. They're not going to be attracted by putting them out, on the fringes. So I'm really cautious about that, and I think we've got enough in the core area. That's just my feeling, because it's with that many more people, you need the wealth to support it. And if you consume all the high revenue areas, then we don't have that commercial side of it. And lastly, I guess why I'm having a lot of issues with this right now, the very fact that now we're about to leapfrog with all the projects on the go with the affordable housing, 107% increase. I think, how much more time do we want to spend on this, seeing we have 4 other strategic priorities? I'm just I'm being a realist right now, and I'm concerned about this because we keep on digressing, whatever you want to call it, and we're not paying attention to what we're supposed to be doing. So that's all my comments. If you could just answer those questions, that'd be appreciated.
Certainly. So with respect to what's an ideal percentage of affordable housing, I don't think there is any in terms of a one-size-fits-all number, but it's hoped that this housing needs assessment will try to determine, relative to the city's goals, what is appropriate. Certainly, council can take some comfort in all of the affordable housing projects that are being funded by BC Housing and what was highlighted in my report are being managed by top-notch third parties. Those include Greater Victoria Housing Society and Pacifica Housing Society. So in those cases, certainly I don't have any concerns with respect to how they're going to be managed, their residents, and how they will play a role in our community. With respect to the second comment, concentration of affordable housing is something that's thought about a lot in terms of policy and citing for non-market housing. It's always seen as a best practice to have a mix of both market and non-market housing. For housing developments in other jurisdictions where there's a requirement for affordable housing, you can see cities like Vancouver require 20% of a development to be non-market. The balance is really contextual, and in our case, we're looking at quite a few additional multifamily units being added to the core that are market rental and purpose-built condominiums. So as I said, through this housing needs assessment, we'll hopefully be able to answer that question a little bit better. And with respect to the city resources that are being expended on affordable housing, staff aren't putting a lot of time into these projects. Really, it's support of the development applications associated with affordable housing projects. They are applying for rezoning. They're applying for development permits to build these projects as a market developer would. And they're accessing, for the most part, affordable housing reserve monies, which are earmarked for exactly that purpose. So in that sense, we are not putting, I don't think, a disproportionate amount of resources into affordable housing beyond what's already earmarked for that purpose.
Anything else, Councillor Kobayashi, before I move on? Okay, thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. When the government first announced that they were going to be requiring these housing needs assessments, perhaps it was jumping to conclusions, but I had thought that it was looking not just at affordable housing, but as to what type of housing your community is likely to need over the next period of time. So are you only looking at affordable housing when you're looking at the housing needs, or are you looking at other things as well?
Yes, absolutely. That issue in terms of the type of housing stock that's required was one of the reasons why we broke out housing type in the demographic study that we prepared late last year.
that will form part of this housing needs assessment in terms of the information that goes into it. And I'd have to confess, I'd have to review the appendix here in the report, which we've attached. So I can certainly follow up with you in terms of what we think is possible after talking to the CRD. But we attach to the report all of the required information that the province is requesting. And there's quite a bit here. But I have to just follow up as to whether housing type as it relates to need is a required component.
Okay, thank you. And when you brought up the slide showing the 20.8%, I just didn't quite follow along with that. I wondered if maybe you could explain it to me a little more.
Right. So this is, if we go back, this is the, looks like the 8th slide in the presentation. I can go back if...
So this slide was simply trying to show what the housing needs, the core housing needs statistics show as the difference between what is faced by owners and renters for unaffordability, and that 28.8% is the rate of housing unaffordability for households that rent in Colwood.
Okay. And so once the housing needs assessment is done, would that be instructive to what the city might do to encourage different types of housing that maybe there is a shortfall of?
Yes, and just as I finished talking after your first question, I did notice that housing type as user group is outlined as a requirement. So in that appendix, it references rental housing, special needs housing, housing for seniors, housing for families. So certainly those would be areas that are looked at by the assessment.
And I promise my last point, just I wanted to remind you, you may recall a few years back that there was a number of newspaper articles about youth in our school districts who were homeless and struggling to find housing supports in order for them to finish their public education. And it certainly was an eye-opener over a number of years to find that, you know, students in Colwood and Langford and View Royal are struggling sometimes to find housing that is appropriate when they may have had some sort of a family breakdown, separation, divorce, various problems. And so I just wanted to put a bookmark in that to remind you about youth housing, and especially for youth who may be accessing social services to whether it's through a youth agreement or other, so that they can stay in their home communities and keep their relationships functioning in order to complete their education.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, maybe a question on the 30% figure. Is that a universal figure? I'd heard that figure like for years of 30%, but I always understood it to refer to either the rent or the mortgage cost, whereas here it's a very much broader number, including utilities, taxes, condominium fees, and insurance. Is that the standard criteria? Is that, so when you talk about it being similar to CMHC, is that what CMHC uses?
Yes, that definition, where the 30% seems to be quite consistent in Canada anyways, The difference is how people calculate that cost. So some entities include taxes, like us, some don't. And as far as I know, the data that I'm presenting from the core housing needs indicators does include a similar basket of costs as we do. One thing I'm not certain on is whether they're considering tax and strata fees as we do, but everything else they include within that 30%.
Yeah, so that could be a few percent. So okay, I guess the other thing I sort of I question, you have the 85 Belmont project in here, and you're using that in some of your figures. That hasn't come to council yet, so we're not quite sure how that might end up. I would suggest the Helios project is another one equally likely to want to rezone the back half of that project to do something similar. And if I could just echo, I think Councillor Kobayashi's concerns. If I was to tee up my golf ball at the intersection of Island Highway and Goldstream Avenue, I could hit most of these projects. I mean, they are all very, very concentrated in an area of town that I think that we all philosophically want to see develop and become vibrant and become a center of employment and interesting things and that. And you know, every time, as we learned on the Aboriginal housing project, you know, that goes ahead, and then a couple of weeks later we find out it's looking for tax reductions as well. So, you know, we have some very major rezonings coming up in South Colwood, and perhaps would be a much more suitable to look to some of these projects to occur there rather than in the core. So I won't go into that in much detail, except to say that I'm not going to support the motion. I think we have a Department of Long Range Planning and Sustainability. I think that this should be a Colwood initiative of let's do it our way and do it for us rather than getting lumped in with the rest of the CRD and getting smushed around. I don't think we should ignore the fact that we have within our community hundreds of subsidized housing for military personnel. I don't know how subsidized it is, but I'm pretty sure it's not all market rent. So how do you look at those numbers, and how do you analyze them, and how are they? I don't want to speak against any kind of subsidized housing. I think, like the others, I agree that a whole community has a whole range of housing for a whole range of needs, but let's look at it our way and not be constrained with figures and procedures that are done by the CRD or by the province. Let's figure it out for ourselves. As I read this, if we do it ourselves, we equally can get complete funding for the consultant. There may be a little more staff time involved, but I think that's worth it, in my opinion, to have control of this process.
Thank you. Before I move on to Councillor Logan, could I get a clarifying statement from staff regarding Councillor Parkinson's statement just now? Would we be able to do it internally, and would the costs, have we even examined that? What have we been doing?
Well, Your Worship, we tried to quantify it somewhat in the report, and it's quite rough, but I want to get my story straight with the report here. So we're projecting that the staff time would be approximately double in terms of what would be needed to support the project. What we're talking about here is applying for the EBCM grant, selecting a qualified consultant, and then managing that consultant's work towards a presentation to council. It's also expected there would be the need for some public consultation, so those events would also require some staff time.
So, sorry, Councillor Logan, just one more final qualifying question. So when you say double staff time, do we have a cost estimate on that?
Your Worship, I could have sworn I've tried to...
The figures that you put in there were the... Yeah.
Right.
14 to 35 hours was
Correct.
the estimate for going to the CRD, and perhaps 70 hours to do it in.
Thank you. Yep.
About 2 weeks.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. I will move on to Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of quick questions, Ian. Does the study or will the study comment on the effect of municipal fees and charges and municipal processes on affordable housing and different types of housing?
Just to clarify, the question is, will the housing needs assessment attack those issues? No. We would look at those if council wanted to review how we apply fees to affordable housing. That would be in subsequent policy.
Okay. Yep. And just kind of getting to Councillor Kobayashi's and Councillor Parkinson's comment, will the study, the housing needs study, kind of look at or recommend where different types of housing should be located, and I look at the dearth of affordable housing within one particular area of Colwood, and we picked on a commercial center, but I think we probably have the same argument if it was all located in the Allendale Pit or Royal Bay, Royal Beach, or Olympic View, and good planning suggests, every type of housing should be well dispersed in different communities within a city. So will the needs assessment kind of look at that and what the recommended mix would look like in particular areas within a municipality?
I don't believe it's a requirement of the province that be part of the housing needs assessment report, but staff could certainly take direction tonight from council in terms of that being looked at within this work. Housing that's currently being subsidized by BC Housing are located in areas where affordable housing providers already have land, and traditionally they're in areas where there's good access to transit. There's also walkable commercial amenities, so easy access to groceries, a pharmacy, and other amenities. So those are all available at the Colwood Corners area. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a proliferation in that area.
Thank you. Just a final question, Your Worship. Aside from the additional staff time, what would be the downside of Colwood kind of looking at this on our own as opposed to something that's driven by the CRD?
Well, I think as mentioned in the report, there's an opportunity here to work with other municipalities and work with CRD Housing, who, as I said, their core competency is dealing with housing issues and planning. There really isn't a lot of major downsides other than other work that staff has been mandated by council to do being displaced by the support of the housing needs assessment.
Councillor Jansen.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I've ticked off some of this as I went along, but I'm always loath to partner up with the CRD in some of these things. It seems like it turns into creation of some kind of new department, requires new staff members for our CRD representative to have to hire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I too want to know what works for us. And if it means we look at it ourselves and we use the OCP as our guiding principle, I would far rather hear from staff what they think should go where in our community. I believe that we may get lost in some of the background noise as a smaller community in the region, and perhaps more of the focus is placed on some of the larger urban areas. Can't tell me that doesn't happen at the CRD. And so I would far rather have an in-depth study that we can hang our hat on that coincides with our fresh OCP, that staff tells us what should go where in our community and where the focus should be, because we're on the cusp of a lot of development, and it concerns me that some of that messaging may be lost. If we wait 6 months for them to report out and we're not happy with it and it doesn't meet our needs, and then we're behind the 8 ball and have to start all over again, I would suggest that we maybe apply for these funds on our own, and we go it alone, and we figure out what works for us. So not having to rely on sort of a senior level or the regional district of government to do our work for us. I would far rather see an accounting of our community that comes to us that then we're accountable for, and we can have an in-depth discussion about the specific housing types and locations. And as you can see, council has some concerns about the locations of some of these upcoming developments, as do I. My limited understanding, I don't think View Royal has had a project like some of these in over 20 years. Why do we have a proliferation here? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but what are the set of circumstances that leads to all these developments in this stone's throw or errant golf ball striking distance? So I have a lot of questions. I would far rather hear from our staff what works for us that coincides with our strategic plan, which is upcoming, I'm sure, and our official community plan. In this form, I have enough concerns. I don't think I'm going to support it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to our CAO. He just had a comment.
Thank you, Worship. Relative to Councillor Logan's question, I guess I have two comments. One is, I think one of the substantive differentiators will be if we were to go it alone, and that's certainly an opportunity of ours, the scale of the contract wouldn't be such that it would attract as qualified a consultant. And so I think there is potential in working with the CRD to get a higher caliber consultant. I have participated in housing needs assessments with less skilled consultants, and fundamentally that ends up having a situation where staff have to either redo much of the work, question the work, and so there is a substantive value in getting a higher qualified candidate, and there is potential in working with our partners at the CRD to do such. Secondly, I think there's a substantive difference between a housing study and a housing assessment. The work that we're required to do and the work that we're discussing with you this evening is an assessment. The assessment will discuss what is the state of our household affordability relative to the various housing types. The provincial requirement seems to be looking at core need and seems to be looking at housing as a cost of core need. Once that assessment is done, staff will need to work on updating a study, and that's, is any additional supports needed? Is additional inventory needed? If so, where does that go? That won't be part of the assessment. The assessment will be numerical. We need an additional 100 units of supported housing, or 100 units of non-market housing, or specifically 100 units of single-parent rental non-market housing. It will not speak to where. Where will be part of a study, and that will be subsequent to the assessment. And so what I'm hearing this evening is study type of questions which will not form part of the assessment.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. I'm just wanting to encourage members of council to consider a few positive things about working with the CRD. And I'm not saying that any of the comments that I heard are wrong. I'm just saying that we're already contributing to CRD's housing. We are already have a relationship. So by utilizing that relationship to maybe allow staff to get on with some other things right now, the staff could then take what comes out of this housing needs report and do something more with it. And we certainly don't want the CRD doing a study for us without the participation of our staff. And we certainly don't want to have to do it all by ourselves and then try to educate them about us, because that's been my experience with the CRD, is that I think there hasn't been an abundance of ill will, but there certainly has been an abundance of ignorance at times about Colwood, because they're more likely to be downtown than they are maybe to be out here. And so I just think the recommendation that we have in front of us could allow us to accomplish what everybody's talked about here tonight, and in a way that maybe builds some partnerships with CRD that we're already paying for anyways.
Thank you. So I will, is there any more discussion before I need a motion? If there's no more discussion, Councillor Parkinson?
I hear you. I'm sorry. I'm not convinced. I would make the motion that the report titled Housing Needs Assessment Partnership and Affordable Housing Update be received, and that Council direct staff to pursue grant funding to undertake a housing needs assessment without the assistance of CRD housing.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter? So we have the motion in front of us. Any other discussion? Councillor Baxter?
I've been sitting listening to everybody's opinion and oscillating back and forth on what we should do here. And I actually think in the end, the CAO's and Councillor Day's comments are important and they sway the day for me. And so I will be voting against this motion.
Thank you. Before I do anything else, with the permission, what I'd like to do is actually sever this because I think we're gonna receive it no matter what. And so let's vote on that. Let's receive it, and then we'll vote on the second part. So are you okay with that, Councillor Parkinson? Okay, so I'm going to sever the motion. So the first part of the motion is that the Director of Long Range Planning and Sustainability report regarding housing needs assessment partnership and affordability housing update be received. Okay, thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by Councillor Logan. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Then I'm going to go back to Councillor Parkinson's motion, which was that, I'm paraphrasing, but basically that it be done in-house rather than going to the CRD. And I believe that was moved by Councillor Parkinson. And who was the seconder on the? Oh, Councillor Baxter. Thank you. Is that clean enough, or do you want me to do it again? Yeah, that's clean enough. Okay. So we're back to that discussion. Is there any other discussion on that motion? Oh, you may.
I thought the important point here is that there is a government regulation that tells us what this assessment is supposed to do. And therefore, there isn't a great deal of flexibility in how it's to be done. What gets layered on top of that, and that's what the CAO referred to as a study, I believe, should then be entirely our product and our approach. But the basic numbers are required by law, and it can probably most efficiently be done by one consultant looking at a large area, if not the entire CRD. Despite what we may have experienced from the CRD occasionally, I think that will be the most efficient way in this case.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to call, oh no, Councillor Parkinson.
Perhaps. If we just look at the report in front of us, and you see it slides things in there, it's compared us, our levels of affordable housing to Langford and Victoria, both very, well-intentioned, good municipalities in the community. Had it compared us to Oak Bay and View Royal, the numbers would have looked completely different. It talked about the rezoning of the 85 Belmont, slipped those things in. I worry that if the CRD goes ahead, creates a report, it's going to make some assumptions about what seems obvious and natural to them and may not seem obvious and natural to us. I just really think as a community, we should be, big boys and big girls and stand up and run our own community and make our own decisions and make our own assessment of these things. The cost of the consultant, as I read this report, is paid 100% by the province either way. Yes, there may be more staff time if we're running the study than if CRD is running the study. There'll be less staff time running into meetings at CRD to review where it's at. There'll be, it's back and forth. It's not black and white. So I'm going to stick with my guns and I'm going to vote for the motion.
All right. No, I'm going to call the question. We're not going back and forth all night. Sorry. So I gave Stuart the last word on that one. So I'm going to call the question. So and just to be clear, and again, I'm paraphrasing the motion, but this is to do it in-house. So all those in favor of the motion? Those opposed? I oppose as well. So Councillor Baxter, Councillor Day, Mayor Martin, Councillor Logan oppose. Do I have a different motion? Anyone?
I'd like to move the recommendation, severed as you said, with the addition that the study be limited, or the, what are they calling it? The report be limited to the legal requirements only.
Okay, so do you have that? Does that make sense to you? Okay, that's the motion. I have a mover, but I do not have a seconder. Yeah, on that. You'll second that. Okay, discussion. Mover always gets the opportunity to discuss it first if you want to, and then Councillor Parkinson, I think, would like to discuss this.
Okay, the reason I added that piece was I'm just trying to satisfy Councillor Parkinson and others who are worried about where this might go. And I think if it just follows the law, then the scope of it's already defined.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Looking to staff, is that, I just want to confirm, is that motion in order? Are we comfortable with that? Does that not restrict us to any concerns or anything along those lines? I just want to make sure.
Your Worship, my only concern would be if we do work out a deal with the consultant that there's added value beyond what is legally required that they're willing to provide, that we'd miss out on that potential added value. But that would be my only concern.
Sure, yeah. Okay. Seeing no other staff comments, no other councillor comments. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kobayashi, Councillor Parkinson oppose. And that passes. Moving on to bylaws. Bylaw number 1778, main sewer 495 Webb Place, final reading.
Move final.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan. Second by Councillor Kobayashi. All those in favor? Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. Discussion. We do have a discussion opportunity. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaw number 1779, West Sewer 495 Webb Place.
Move final.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Baxter. Second by Councillor Jensen. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaw number 1784, main sewer 3355 St. Troy Place. Final reading. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi. Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 10.5, bylaw number 1785, West Sewer 3355 St. Troy Place. Final reading.
Move first.
Oh, is it a first? No, it's
Sorry.
final. It's final.
Oh, we're still on 10.4?
I'm on 10.4. Sorry.
Okay,
did I
sorry.
do 10? I haven't done 10. Yeah, thank you. I'm on 10.4.
Okay, move final.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Moved by Councillor Baxter, second by Councillor Kobayashi. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 10.5, bylaw number 1780, false alarm bylaw, first, second, and third readings.
Move first.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor. Moved by Councillor Logan. All those in favor? Sorry.
Okay.
I can come to second. You can discuss it in second. I can't do discussion on first. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I have the same mover and seconder for second. Discussion. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just that we didn't have any presentation on this. Did I miss it? Was it presented previously?
Paul, you're kind of looking. Come on up.
Thank you, Your Worship. The false alarm bylaw, as part of the ongoing review of the city bylaws, the false alarm bylaw has been reviewed and completed by staff. The intent of the bylaw is obviously to reduce false alarms and the drain on emergency services that come from attending these false alarms. The review identified unnecessary administration costs, and so what we have done, work with the bylaw, is to streamline the administration and improve cost recovery for that. Staff have also discussed with both the RCMP and the fire department on the changes that were being proposed. So staff are presenting the bylaw and the MTI bylaw for both 3 readings.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Day.
Sorry, so just my question is in regard to the fines, which are moving from 0 to $600 in the first 12 months if there's 3 false alarms, and then in the second 12 months if there's 3 false alarms, it's moving up to $2,100. And in my experience, and I could be wrong, I didn't have a chance to contact the fire department to find the statistics, but in the past, I've certainly had the experience of being aware of seniors, particularly, who feel less secure as they get older. They install an alarm system, and then they occasionally run into problems with the running of it. Is there an option to waive some of those fees if there is extenuating circumstances?
The option to waive the fees I don't believe that is an option, because you're buying by bylaw. Now, the costs that you're referring to, these are fees for service. So what the comparison is this is just done on the fire department's response. So the original or the current bylaw allows you to have 3 false alarms, and there are no costs associated with that. What the new bylaw has done is reduce that down to 2 false alarms over the 12-month period, and then the increases is if you had more than if you go up to 3 over 24 months period. So they're not fines, they're fees for service. So if somebody has a false alarm, they get the first 2 free. So if somebody is having challenges with their system, then they wouldn't outright pay for that cost. Now, a fee for service could, I think at discretion of council, could be waived.
Okay. So that would then require it to come to council if someone was pleading that it was difficult for them because of some extenuating circumstance?
Every person in the public has the right to bring forward and challenge a bylaw in front of council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Jensen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions, Paul. Specific to police false alarms, do they have a Callwood ticket book? Like, how is that communicated to staff? Do they write a ticket that then flows through here, or a false alarm notice even that flows through to us, or are we waiting for them to phone us and tell us there was a false alarm, or what kind of process is set up on that side?
Okay, there's the difference between ticketing and the fee for service. So the ticketing is a fine. So the RCMP have the ability to write a ticket for the offences contained within the MTI bylaw. The fees that are within the false alarm bylaw is a cost associated to providing that service. So the way looking at streamlining the process is the RCMP and the fire department would communicate directly with finance, and then the invoice would go out from them. Is that right?
So when a
Th-
police
there-
officer shows up at a house and there's a false alarm, what flows after that?
So the communication.
False, not home. It's just a blaring alarm. It's not a break-in. So what happens as far as the administration after that?
So what would happen is the RCMP would communicate with the finance department of the city, and that would be recorded for the first false alarm. So because there's two different departments, we have you're tracking both. So once you have two, so you can have one from either the fire department and the one from the RCMP. So there would be no invoice created unless you actually have two, more than two. So to be on the third
Okay,
issue.
I'm looking for a little more specificity. Are you telling me that that officer now has to phone our finance department and tell them that there's been a false alarm?
Well, no,
I'll
the
tell you. How about this? I am familiar with some jurisdictions where you have I don't know which ones, but anyways, you have a notebook and it's a false alarm notice, and you leave one at the door, and then the other part goes back to City Hall. So it generates a paper trail. It goes from the RCMP detachment to City Hall. City Hall then keeps a file. Oh, we're up to 3. Send them a bill. Is that how this is going to work? Or because it seems to me if we're relying on someone to make a phone call to the finance department, I can see that some things are going to get missed here.
Well, it's done through their administration, so it's done through their dispatch. So the RCMP and the fire department record their calls for service. So the administration department would communicate with ours.
Daily, quarterly, hourly?
But that would be determined on the number of calls.
Okay.
So I think currently they would do it every month.
Okay, so conceivably you get a report at the end of the month saying there's been a false alarm at these locations in your community to the finance department.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Any other? All right. Seeing no other discussion, I'm going to call the question on the, this is second reading we're in now. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Day opposes. Third reading, same mover and seconder. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Day opposes. Moving on to bylaw number 1781, first, second, and third reading. May I have a mover? Thank you. Councillor Baxter's
Second.
Councillor Logan. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. On to second reading, same mover and seconder. Discussion in regards to the municipal ticket information bylaw. Paul, before you sat down, was there anything that you wanted to add regarding the municipal ticket information bylaw, number 1314, 2010 amendment, number 12? Okay, thank you. All right, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Day opposes. Move third. Same mover and seconder. All those discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor. Opposed. Councillor Day opposes. And that is it. All those in favor. Opposed. Carried.